I guess the biggest change is the removal of the Section 21 notice. So historically, landlords have always been able to serve a Section 21 notice and bring the tenancy to an end to get vacant possession, providing the tenancy afforded them either a break clause or they were approaching the end of the tenancy. And it was called the no fault notice because a landlord could serve it without any reason. For whatever reason they needed vacant possession. It could be that they wanted to give it to a family member, they wanted to carry out a major refurbishment, or simply that the relationship between the landlord and the tenant had broken down and that they just wanted to start afresh. So that's going to be the biggest change for landlords, because now there are very prescribed grounds for a landlord to recover possession, and they have to justify it and prove it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the real world, because if a landlord now wants to sell a property, they can't just serve notice and then sort of test the water. They'd be serving 4 months notice, but then once they've got vacant possession, they then can't re-let the property for a period of 12 months if the property doesn't sell. So it will be interesting to see how this works for landlords and how landlords will decide to proceed on that basis, and knowing that they're restricted in some ways as to what they can do. In some ways it's a good thing, because I think, you aren't taking a home away from a tenant unnecessarily. But in other ways, circumstances change for both landlords and tenants. So that flexibility, I think, is going to be quite difficult for them. I think you learn about a tenant from the very beginning, from their inquiry, from their viewings. It starts really with the negotiator and their involvement in the process. A tenant being the right fit for a property is not just, they go in and they like the look of it. You're essentially piecing two people together, and is that relationship going to work? A tenant will have many different requirements, and if you get a feel for a tenant, if they're coming in and they've got a long list of requirements and they want everything new and this is all lovely, but they're moving into a period property that has its quirks, you start to think, are we going to be running into issues with this tenancy? So it's about asking the right questions from the get-go. Why do they want to be in that locality? What is their lifestyle? Are they going to be working from home a lot? Are they going to be working away long hours, so they're not going to be too bothered? It's a noisy street, it's a busy bus route. All of these things you have to take into consideration as to how they're actually going to live within a property. I think one of the biggest concerns landlords have is that a tenant is going to move in and just cause a lot of damage to the property, when in reality that's actually very rare. Tenants move in and they're building a home, so they take care of it and they make it look nice. We go in and see some properties, unfurnished properties, and within a couple of months it looks stunning. That's quite often the case. The problems occur when there's something going on in the property that the tenant isn't really aware of. They don't understand buildings necessarily in the way that we do as property managers. So, a little mark or a stain in the corner of a room to them goes unnoticed because they're living their lives day to day. They're not focused on that. They don't realise and flag it to us or to their landlord until it's a huge water stain that's all the way up the wall, across the ceiling. Then it's a bigger problem that could have been nipped in the bud earlier on. So I think it's essential for landlords to seriously consider professional management at all times, because we really are the eyes and ears, and we can notice these things and work with tenants and landlords to address them early on. Lots of things happen. So the tenant reports an issue to the property managers. My property manager are all senior PMs, so they understand property, they understand tenant requirements, they have relationships with their tenants, they're the single point of contact, so they will have built a good relationship with their landlords and understand how their landlords like to work. So when a tenant calls in or emails in, the first thing the PM should do is try and troubleshoot and find out if it's a problem that the tenant can be resolving themselves in the property. The lights have gone. Is it just a tripped fuse on the fuse board? So taking some time out to troubleshoot rather than just sending a contractor to incur charges for the landlords and a delay for the tenants sometimes unnecessarily. If it is a genuine issue, then the PM has to consider who's the best contractor suited for the job, their availability, what are the access restrictions at the property, updating the landlord, getting authorisation for the spend. So there's a whole chain of events that happen, just from the smallest thing to the biggest things.